things happen. And we appreciate what they do, and you letting us work with your families is probably the greatest thing we get to do, so thank you. I'm here to introduce three people, a couple who I know very well, and I'm going to start right here on my left. And on my left is JoHanna Ward, the Director of the Office for Exceptional Children in the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. She's passionate about building comprehensive, coordinated, and collaborative efforts across the statewide systems of support and empowering districts and schools to improve student development and achievement. At DEW, Ms. Ward is proud to lead a team that provides leadership, assistance, and oversight to school districts and other entities that provide differentiated instruction for students with disabilities and gifted students. I've known JoHanna for a number of years, and her commitment to our students and the families, it's paramount in the work that we do in Ohio. Next, I get to introduce to you Kimberly Hauck. She served as the Director of the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities since 2022. Director Hauck's lifelong, she has supporters in the crowd. There we go. Director Hauck's lifelong service to this exceptional community began right here in Hamilton County, where she served as a direct service professional and special education teacher. Thank you. Thank you. During her career, she has shown extensive support and dedication to the state's early intervention system. We know the earlier we get them in, the further we can get them along. So Kimberly, thank you for your work. And last but not least, Kevin Miller, who's sitting up here, actually grew up with me in West Jefferson, Ohio. I will not let my eye take over and share any stories today because I tend to like to share stories, but I will not do that to Kevin. But if you want stories later, yeah, if you want stories later, I'm happy to give you. Kevin Miller is the Director of Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. He has more than 30 years of service to state-level agencies and has been Director of OOD since 2011, which is it's a good tenure right there. Among the new initiatives developed under Director Miller's leadership include Ohio College to Careers, OOD Job for Recovery, the Ohio Vocational Apprenticeship Program, and the development of the Ohio Transition Support Partnership and the Employment First Partnership. The most important driver of Director Miller's work might be his personal life, as his son is on the autism spectrum as well. And I will say this, I think, number one, growing up with Kevin, I can tell you, he has always been a fun, caring person. I think all the people up here, you would agree that they're here for the right reasons, which is to help the network of Ohio and how we help people navigate that. So with that, you really don't want to listen to me anymore. And so I'm going to turn it over to JoHanna Ward. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I have the most respect for you two. So I appreciate working along with you, and all our teams work so collaboratively together. So I'm really excited about the great things that the future can bring with all our teams. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's happening with the Department of Education and Workforce related to our students who are on IEPs. And I'm going to do some information and hopefully share some links for you. So this PowerPoint will be available. You should be able to get it later. There are hyperlinks in here, or you can easily Google them, and there's some QR codes available to you too. So first, when we talk about special education, what does that mean to be exceptional? So when we talk about special education, our effort is to help everyone focus on students are students first. They're general education students first. And the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, is a civil rights law that's put into place to ensure that our students get their general education curriculum and can be receiving the same education as everyone else and have those supports in place that they need. So to get those supports, to get those modifications, to get that specially designed instruction, there's an IEP that comes along with it that clearly explains what the goals are. What is the learning instruction that needs to happen? What are the supports? And what are the efforts that we all need to put in place as a team for our students? This law also requires child find. So it's responsibility of the district to ensure that they locate, evaluate, and support students identified with special needs through an IEP. So they have a responsibility to go find the students. And then this law also ensures that students, we want students to graduate by meeting the same requirements as students not on an IEP. So following that graduation pathway, and if needed, a student can stay through their 21st birthday. They can stay till they're 21 to receive additional supports and services. We have a webpage on our website that is for families of students with disabilities. So this is really exciting webpage. We just put it together last year, so it's only been out there about a year. And guess who's on there? Parent-mentors, raise your hand. Parent-mentors are on there. Yes, thank you. Parent-mentors are a project supported out of our agency. They are actually, there's a line item in the state budget that supports funding parent-mentors across the state, and then we supplement that with some additional federal funds so that we have over 100 parent-mentors across the state. If you want to know more about parent-mentors or how to access them or where they are, you can get to them from this webpage. We also have information on this webpage with our most newest efforts. However, I think DODD has been doing this, charting the life course. So we've seen what's come out of DODD and charting the life course and use of charting the life course tools, and guess what? We jumped on that bandwagon too. So we are elevating and working with charting the life course and getting it out across districts across the state. So it's really exciting. So there's other information on this webpage. You can find our evaluation roadmap, and that's great. It's purposely designed for families, but guess what? All the educators love it and like using it too. And our transition roadmap. So also, I'd like to tell you about our special education profiles. So this is like a fancy word for the special education report card. I'm not going to go into like all the boring details about our report card and data and so on and so forth, but I think it's important that you know that what we expect districts to do and what the federal law expects to happen for students is measured and evaluated. So there is data out there, and you should be asking your districts questions about that data. So how do we do that? On our website, we have this posted. If you type in special education profiles or data, this is a list of all the indicators that are measured. There are 18 indicators that we measure that are happening across districts and in schools for students. And then what we want districts to do is look at that data and think about where they're going and develop their efforts to improve their data and use these essential questions that you see on the screen to help drive their plan, to drive their work. So these are questions that you all can use too. So if you look at the data or you're sitting with a team or an IEP team or talking to a district, these might be questions you want to ask them. So let's take a look at a little bit of data real quick. This is our graduation rate. So one of the efforts, we look at the data at state level and decide what are we going to do as a state agency? How do we leverage our platform, our funds, and our supports out to the field to improve some data points? We have a 5-year plan, and we are focused on graduation right now. So as you see here, our students with disabilities are not graduating at the highest level. Our goal is at least 70% of our students with disabilities or students on IEP graduating by meeting the same pathways as students who are not on IEPs, right? So the same graduation requirements. And right now, we are at only about 57%. So we want to move up. And here's what we look like compared to the rest of the country. This is divided into tier tiles, so Ohio falls in the middle of the pack at the bottom of the 3 tiers. We can do better. So that's what our efforts are angled at the state. We are putting our efforts in transition, post-secondary transition, leveraging connections to DODD and OOD to help lift that up and support our students to get on the pathways and get moving in the right direction. Speaking of transition then, this is something you might want to think about. Post-secondary transition and workforce development, the rules and regulations. If you go to our website and type in secondary transition, rules and regulations, you can get to this page and it will have all kinds of resources and supports. But one thing that might help you when you're talking to districts, talking to IEP teams, is there is a checklist there. And it's called Indicator 13 checklist, because that goes back to one of the measurements that we're measuring. And there are specific requirements that we are looking for when districts and IEP teams put together a plan for a student, and they're all on that checklist. But what this chart shows here are the places where we see the most issues with the IEPs. So these are the areas that we're not doing so well across the state. We take that data very seriously, and then we hone in on what supports we can provide particular districts or IEP teams or schools to improve their efforts in setting up great transition processes and supports for students. So I want to share that with you. This is a quick screenshot example of our secondary transition roadmap. So this roadmap is designed across the lifespan. So it goes from K-12, so you enter school, and when you get to 12th grade or graduation. There are benchmarks and places to stop along the way. There's a little suitcase that says this is where you might want to pause and collect additional information for your road trip. This is interactive. You can click on different links to get to information, get to sort resources and tools that will help you and your families and IEP teams move on that, move along the pathway. I also want to share, and I'm doing these really fast. I also want to share our career pathways. Our agency has some great toolkits out there and some ways to think about as we mark where a student wants to go, what they want to be, what their aim is, how we get them there, right? So there's some great toolkits to help design the pathway, help talk about the pathway from elementary school, middle school, high school, and then post-high school. What are the different access points that any student can take or engage with, and what are the different system structures that are in place to support all along that pathway to get somewhere. So there's a list of 25 different pathways already developed, and the teams that are out there supporting that are also astute enough to probably help develop, if you want a pathway that's not on there, to help you figure that out. One of our biggest connections with OOD then is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and that put into place in the law saying that we want to make sure that all people, and our students in particular, are ready, capable to achieve high quality, competitive, integrated employment. So we work in collaboration. I have a whole team of transition support people that work in collaboration with OOD. And then they provide supports to our, let me get to this one, there, to our IEP teams. And then they work with students on expanding access from 14 all the way up to 21 on different access points and supports and resources and tools to help our students get on their pathway, right? We talked about pathways and finding the right pathway to get to your goal at the end. So this is a great intersection between multiple agencies. We also, during that time, there's also a focus on pre-employment transition services. No, this wasn't something we were going to talk about. Nope. Okay, great. These are the 5 different areas which we focus on, working with teens and working with our students, and through OOD, they can have access to job exploration counseling, work-based learning, workplace readiness training, instruction and self-advocacy. That's a big space that we're working in right now, and counseling on post-secondary opportunities. So all these are available. You want to be asking questions about how a student's IEP is set up for this success. So each Child on Track is our 5-year state systemic improvement plan. We, having a federal IDEA grant at the state, which is used to support schools and districts and students, requires that we have a plan that we submit to the federal government. So our plan is Each Child on Track, and that plan has a theory of action. Let me go through it there. And as you heard earlier, one of the main things that I like to promote, and our team knows this, we all promote, is that collaboration. How does a complex system work in collaboration together? So how are families involved? What's a family partnership into this space on exploring access and support for students to get to graduation and post-secondary? How do we ensure that all the school personnel are capable and ready to lift up on that support and move in that direction? So we have focus on all the school personnel in that space, not only our special education instructors, but gen ed instructors too. What are the collaborative structures that need to put in place, like scheduling, that allow for those discussions to happen so that all together the teams can support students moving forward. And we are working on multi-tiered systems of support, and what that means is we're really looking at some data, looking at some early warning system ideas, and looking at data related to each particular student and identifying where a student might be falling through a crack. What is it that we need to do to help that student? Maybe it's algebra. Well, that was mine. So what is it that I needed for algebra to get me over the hump and get me through that space so I could graduate on time with my peers, right? So we don't know that unless we all stop as a team and look at the data and figure out what's happening in that space and what is the specially designed instruction and supports needed. And then leadership has to help make that happen. If the leadership teams don't allow for restructuring schedules or a place for collaboration, then the system falls down and none of those supports can happen well for any student. So we're working hard on bringing all those pieces together so that more students with disabilities graduate with a regular diploma. So what this has done the last 2 years, we've been working the state systemic improvement plan. We've had 2 cohorts of districts working with us to kind of pilot this, try this out before we roll it out across the whole state. So we've had 6 school districts in the first cohort, 14 in the second. We've reached over 10,000 students across those 2 cohorts. So we're really excited about the work that we're doing and the impact that we can make. Once we get past year 5, then we'll have a sustainable process that we roll out that's available to our district, all districts across the state. And then, as you know, students with disabilities have 2 ways to graduate. You can graduate with a regular diploma, or you can graduate by meeting the requirements on your IEP. But in order to help teams make decisions on the best pathway for a student to graduate, hopefully by meeting the requirements to get a regular diploma, we've developed a graduation decision tool. So that's something we just rolled out. We want district teams, IEP teams, school teams to use that when they're considering what is the pathway to support our students to get to graduation and beyond. I think that's it.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Like you said during the introduction, I'm from Hamilton County, so it's always fun to come back and be here with some really familiar faces. One of my first jobs was actually right down here on Civic Center at Briar School. I'm going to show how old I am now at Briar School, so I think it's been gone for quite a number of years now, but that's where I started my teaching career, so it is really fun to be here with everybody. So I talked to Gary, and he gave me a few topics that he thought that you all might be interested in. So we're going to talk about the budget that has been in place for a little bit now, and some waiver changes that happened in January, and then a big project that we have going on that we call the waiver redesign or modernization project. So hopefully you've all heard and you've celebrated the huge budget investment that Governor DeWine and the General Assembly made. $1.5 billion new money into our system, with $1.3 billion of that going directly to rates to support wages for what we call direct support professionals, or DSPs. And obviously this would not have happened. We would not have been as successful as we were during the budget process without all the family members and people with disabilities who went to the State House and testified either in person or in writing. You all were coordinated together. We've just never really seen anything like it before. So congratulations to all of you for that hard work and where we're at today. And just for some perspective, when Governor DeWine took office, it was reported that DSPs made an average of $11.12 an hour. And now, after the next increase that will go into effect in July, will be around $19 an hour. So, congratulations. Our intermediate, I'm gonna try really hard not to use acronyms, I know I'm really bad about it, but our intermediate care facilities, or ICFs, also saw that around 38% increase as well. And then people who are living dependent on trachs and those sorts of things also saw significant increases to what we call add-on rates. That specifically was around 200%. So we're really excited to be able to support the people who are supporting those living with a disability. Another thing that was a really big investment were some one-time funds. So they are from the American Rescue Plan Act, or you might hear ARPA funds. So the General Assembly approved those one-time expenditures, and we received about $56 million in that funding line, or that stream. And again, they're one-time funds. They have to support home and community-based services, or HCBS services, within our waivers, and they have to be spent by next March, so March of 2025. So I'm going to just quickly talk about some of the things that we're using those funds for. We have put out RFPs, or grant opportunities, and those are requests for funding, or requests for proposals. So, and I'll tell you who was kind of eligible to apply for those. But we divided the funds into 5 kind of buckets of work, and that was support for people and their families, workforce support, what we call multi-system youth, and those are youth living with complex behavioral challenges, innovative technology, and then again, that waiver redesign that we're gonna talk about in a little bit. So one of the first buckets of money that we were able to award were funds that went directly to our county boards of developmental disabilities. We received 59 applications, and you could be a county board or a council of government. So many of our county boards went together and applied as partners. Some did singular. So, but we granted everyone that applied, either in whole or in part. And that was right around $15 million for that bucket, or that of funds. So one thing that I'm really excited about and want to point out is about $4 million went to 49 applicants around to help increase access to universal changing tables around our state. And I want to point out that that really is the largest investment in the nation. And we really have 2 moms, Kim and Jennifer, who have advocated for years in this space, to thank for their hard work and dedication in helping us access these funds and get that kind of over the finish line. Another bucket of funding that went was for workforce support projects. That was about $5 million that we awarded in this area. There were 43 projects. That was about 31 individual agencies, and you can see what the average grant award was, around $116,000. Agency providers, county boards, council of governments, community organizations, and trade organizations were able to apply for this funding. And then on this slide, I know you probably can't see it today, but I wanted to make sure that you had a slide that just had examples of the items that and projects that we funded. So a lot around DSP, both personal and professional supports. We wanted to support frontline supervisors and mentoring and the supervision things that come across their way. DSP focused organizational culture, awareness campaigns, and again, maximizing relationships, that sort of thing. So you'll see those when you have access to the presentation. Another area was supporting people with disabilities and their families. So we had about 5 projects that we funded in this grouping, supported decision-making, really focusing on promoting strategies and building resources in that space for folks. Mentorships, so asking an agency to help us establish a program that connects families and people living with disabilities to experienced peers who can offer guidance, support in navigating our system. A leadership academy, so everybody in this room, right, thinks that equipping people with lived experience and their family members in their advocacy and leadership and just being able to actively contribute to decision-making processes are so important. So we want to make sure that people are focusing on that and have the skills and abilities. JoHanna mentioned Charting the Life course, so we wanted to expand that and make sure that families can identify their vision for a fulfilling life. And then lastly, we wanted to spend some resources on developing content for SSA trainings. And SSAs are support and service administrators that work at our county boards, and just ensuring that they have the resources and the tools that they need to do their difficult job. And then lastly, the last 2 sections are around technology and that multi-system youth space. So a common theme that I really hear is the need for our DSPs or staff to have a higher level of training than a traditional DSP in these spaces. So when you're working with technology or youth who have really complex needs, understanding what those are and how to meet the needs. And I would say our system has historically struggled to meet these, especially youth who are at home with their families. So, what are those supports and services? What do they look like? How are they different than what someone's receiving in another environment? And so one of the things that we have been working on is a waiver pilot. So we have 3 counties who are participating with us to look at, how do those services differ from what we already have in place? What could they look like? How much do they cost? Those sorts of things. And so, we'll be working through that over the next year, and obviously with our goal to expand the service to adults who have that same level of need. One of the things that we're doing in the technology space I think is really exciting is we are standing up regional hubs across our state. So we are using our county board superintendent regional map. Say that 6 times really fast. So there are 6 regions across Ohio, and we're standing up a hub in each of those regions, really with the purpose to support the communities in those areas on creating the partnerships, the networks, and the collaborations that are needed to help expand those technology efforts in our state. Okay, the waiver changes that took place in January. So I know, the administration really prioritized improving supports for people and families coming out of the pandemic. So we really tried to look at the lessons that we learned and the benefits that we saw from the flexibilities that happened during those 2-3 years. And 2 of the things that we heard most often was around shared living and paying family caregivers to care for their minor children. So those 2 things we had changed in January significantly to ongoing, so into the future for as long as we need them. But we really wanted to look at flexibility and providing additional support for families who are caring for their loved ones. So in the shared living space, they received the same rate increase that all the other providers received, so that 38% or so. We changed our respite service so you can receive some shared living and respite on the same day. And then we also added in where you could be exempted out from the shared living service and bill for homemaker personal care if that's needed. So if your loved one requires 2-to-1 staffing, or if they require 24-hour awake care, and there's other things. Some of our add-ons, our complex care add-on or our behavior add-on, if they need some of those services, then you're able to exempt out of shared living, which we have not allowed in the past. Services can also be provided when there's an acute hospital stay. We learned right during the pandemic how important that was, and we had not allowed for that in the past. And then lastly, we had never allowed for parents to get paid to care for their minor children. And so that is now also permanent, and there are some parameters set in there, and it's a brand new service, so we're still working through some of that, but we're excited that it's available to families who need it. So lastly, our waiver redesign initiative. So under the redesign work, there are several other projects. And this really, a year ago, I can't believe it's already been a year, we traveled to all 88 counties and we sat with everybody, folks who came to visit with us, and we heard about the issues and the struggles within our waiver system. And it really is a nearly 20-year-old system that we've not made significant changes to. So we're happy to be doing that now and really looking at what are the changes that need to occur. So one of the projects is called our Blueprint and Adult Day and Employment Service. Back in 2020, recommendations were made to the department from a group of stakeholders that had been meeting for quite some time, and we continue now to look at implementation strategies and how do we continue to roll out those recommendations. Another project was in 2022, we looked at the level 1 and self waiver simplification and improvement. So we did things like removed some caps in that waiver. We brought online some self-directed transportation, which I know there are still, some issues and some things to work out in that service, but we continue to look at that. And then we already talked about the January 24 changes. And then the last project is what we call our waiver modernization project, and I cannot say that word ever. So, and there again are many projects or buckets underneath that. So we are looking at assessments. Becky and others have shared with me over the years that the DDP is a struggle. So we are looking at that and looking to see what formalized assessment might be out there to better meet our needs in Ohio. Rates and provider billing, we've been looking at that. We talked about the shared living, we've looked at remote supports and others. And then we also have a county board work group that really we're looking at the sustainability of our county boards and funding and how all of that works, both state, local, federal funding, and how those play together. It's been an exciting project. It's been a lot to look at. We did hire Deloitte to come in and help us, and hopefully you've seen some of their family meetings that they've held across the state. Many of those have been virtual, and there'll be more opportunities as we wrap up this work. So stay tuned and continue please to send your ideas and suggestions to the department. That's the only way we get better, and I really do enjoy hearing from all of you.
Okay, I guess that's my turn. I'm going to stand up just because two things. One, I can't see the screen, so I'm going to have to make sure I look at the screen as I go through. Want to give a special shout out first and foremost to Gary, always a phenomenal partner, for inviting us down to talk with the folks that make it happen. I also want to give a special shout out to my friend Jane Gerhardt, who's a former OOD council member. So thank you, Jane, and also Adam Herman, who's partner with the County Boards Association. I think we got a coffee scheduled soon, that we do every month. So appreciate being out here and talk a little bit about OOD. I'm going to do follow Kim's lead as well and try not to use as many acronyms as many of all of you know your acronyms. Probably don't know my acronyms, just like I don't know all of yours. So, a little bit about OOD at a high level is, we're supporting individuals with disabilities, make sure they live up, as Governor DeWine says, to their God-given potential. We just recently expanded our mission to go beyond employment for the first time, doing something that no other state coordinated effort is doing, which is an effort called Accessible Ohio, which is to make sure it doesn't matter what disability you have. Could you go to the Great American Ballpark and enjoy a ball game? Could you go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and be able to enjoy the things that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame have? We've not been able to do that previously because our funding was tied to the employment aspects of vocational rehabilitation. So this is a new initiative to make sure that it supports Governor DeWine's executive order that he literally signed moments after he was sworn into office that said Ohio would be a disability inclusion state and a model employer. So with our partners, we try to make sure we do that by making sure we do not be confused with IEPs, we do IPEs, just to confuse everybody. Individualized plans of employment. We serve every physical disability, hearing disability, vision, learning, mental health, sensory disabilities, you name it. We want to work with people starting at the age of 14, although what I would say all the time as a dad of a young man now with a disability, that you can never stop talking about your child, what they want to do when they get older. It's something that I think we have to keep telling our parents to keep doing. So we want to put a plug in that don't wait till 14, keep talking about that. And we'll be there to start talking and being in IEP meetings with the schools, with our counselors to help navigate the system. Everything is about navigation. We do so much, you guys do so much, our partners do so much. I hear one thing more often than anything is parents saying, it's not that I don't know there's all this stuff out there, but it's like sitting in the cockpit of a fighter jet, and I'm like, which dial, button, whistle, heads up display do I look at, and which one do I press? So that's what we got to try to do, is make it easier. One of our divisions is the Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation, very commonly known as BVR, because we love our acronyms. That's just a fancy way of, our mission is to make sure we try to get people employed. If we get people employed, it means that they're going to have greater independence. If they have greater independence, all of the studies show individuals live longer, they have a more fulfilled life, they have more purchasing power, which means more options. Our services for the visually impaired, separate division, specializes in serving, as it says, individuals with visual impairment. We have a lot of partnerships, including Kathy here down in Southwest Ohio, does a great job. We make sure, recently we were about on every TV station around the globe, literally, as part of an Accessible Ohio initiative, partnered with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources for the eclipse. I know it was big down here in Cincinnati, right? We were also right in the path of totality, and we had 29 devices that we were able to bring in from Harvard, yes, that Harvard, and partnered with the local parks so that individuals who had visual impairment could go out and enjoy the eclipse in a way that maybe was never thought of before. So being innovative. Some of the things that we do when we get into the nitty-gritty of what it means, what we do for vocational rehabilitation, obviously assessments. We want to be able to have our counselors have conversations about what it is that you want to do. And a lot of our counselors will say, one of the toughest things we have to do is talk to somebody about, we want to maximize what you can do with the skill sets that you have. It doesn't do us any good to have conversations about, as I always like to joke, although we do have a manned space program now through, I guess, SpaceX and some of the other things, is if you have the capabilities to do that, we want to make sure we can help you become the astronaut that you really want to be. But if you can't do algebra, which by the way, Chad will tell you, Mrs. Fredericks was like, I think you need to think of a job in public service because you're not going to be an astronaut. As soon as they put letters with numbers, I was like, well, public service, here I come. We need to make sure that we match that because then we're not setting people up for some unrealistic expectations. So that's where career exploration comes in our counselors. Career planning and counseling. You know, one of the things that we were also fortunate enough, like Director Hauck, is that we were able to receive funding through the General Assembly at the request of Governor DeWine to receive full match for the first time in almost 30 years. That also wouldn't have been able to happen without a large part of the partnerships that are here talking en masse about everything that individuals with disabilities need. So we thank you for that. Skill development and training. How do we get you a credential? And it's not meaning you just got to get a bachelor's degree. We're learning more and more every day, even with traditional students. People can actually make a lot more money. I don't know about you guys, have you ever called a plumber? That's a big dent in your checkbook, right? I'm dating myself. No one writes checks anymore. In Venmo, the plumber. How do we make sure that we understand that credentials mean greater employment opportunities? It means greater wages. And talking with families that it's what they can do, not what they can't do. Let's start talking about those things. Apprenticeships and work experience. One of the great things with our College to Careers program is our counselors have one arm sitting in the Disability Services Office or whatever terminology they use, but more importantly, one arm in the Career Placement Office of the university, because I always like to tell my son, the job is supposed to be at the end of this rainbow that we're on, right? So we know many times, I give a lot of credit to Dr. Pinto at the University of Cincinnati. He shared a story with me. He said, I was the Dean of Engineering at University of Louisville. We had a young man who was in a wheelchair, and he was really the best student I had, but they had a co-op model. So his senior year, he needed to go on site and work. They had no idea how to approach any of the firms that they had partnered with to say, hey, can you help, let's just call him Jeff, can you help Jeff with this? They had no idea. He ended up dropping out, an engineer. So what's important is how do we help also have over 700 employer partners here in the state of Ohio who understand what our role is and to help them. We're not the police. We're here to try to make it more accessible for you. Make sure that individuals, because I always say, don't take my word for it, look at all the studies. Businesses that hire individuals with disabilities see greater work retention, they see their onboarding costs go down, and morale go up. You know, every day I walk into my office and I have an individual with a disability at my front desk, and whatever bad day I've had, I realize I have no excuse because she never misses a day. And she's smiling and says, good morning, Director. I go, good morning, Cassie, how are you? Do you have a good weekend? Yep. And she works. She's not somebody, she's talented. And she's gonna get promoted at some point in time. Don't tell her boss that I said that because she'll freak out. But so job placement, workplace accommodation. How do we make sure we demystify these myths like, well, won't I get sued if I hire someone with a disability? Is it okay if I say it's nice to see you to somebody who's blind? Yes, you can. How do we do disability etiquette training for businesses to understand those things? And then obviously on the job supports to help people be able to navigate through the employment process and what to expect with that. So again, I said students 14 plus, I always want to put an asterisk next to that. Start talking even at the age of 5 years of age. Just historically, data, parents, I just had it happen over the weekend. I'm sure it probably happens to JoHanna and Kim, I'm sorry, director and director. Where, because they know what we do, a cousin's brother's friend just found out their son or daughter has a disability. Is it okay if they give you a call? Sure. What's one of the first things they ask me? Can they qualify for Social Security? And I go, how old are they? They're 6. Well, how about we talk about what type of employment perhaps, that your daughter could do. Let's start with that premise first, instead of what maybe they can't do. And that's got to start way before 14. Okay? Enhancing student success, we were just down here. I want to give a shout out to my Southwest crew over there. Wave everybody over there. Jerica Cruz, who's our area manager down here in Southwest, along with Vanessa and Dave over there, as their associate managers. We did a 5-county transition expo for juniors and seniors, am I correct in that, guys? Who were learning everything about how do you interview. And they did skits, which was really good. So we had like counselors in there with hats on backwards and, you know, clothes that didn't match and all the things you wouldn't want to do, right? But it's a way for them to visually be able to make a connection, understand. So here's the things that we want you to teach you on. How do you interview? How do you sell yourself? We do this thing called your elevator speech. Just like what you would think. You're in an elevator and someone says, hey, what do you do? You're able to sell yourself. And consistently, whenever we do those and we have job fairs that are attended there, they always say they're the most well-prepared. You know, the individuals who come in, we come back here because we've had great success hiring individuals with disabilities. So I always say, don't take my word for it. Let me get a couple businesses on the line here to let you know why it's successful. Post-secondary education and employment, I mentioned college to careers. We want to make sure people also understand it's not just college. Short-term credentials, becoming a plumber, being certified in HVAC, you know, making sure you want to become a barber, you want to become a nail tech. If you have that type of credential, that's going to allow you more options. So that's something we're working with JoHanna and also the Governor's Workforce Board, which I sit on, talking about why those things are so important and having that be a part of the vernacular. Obviously, we value education. We know the more you learn, the better off it's going to be for you to understand all the different things that you can do. We work with the universities to talk about, especially kids. It's not like we're seeing less kids each year on IEPs, right, JoHanna? It's increasing. How do we work with universities to understand you've got a whole population of kids coming into the universities that are on IEPs? It's a little bit different being in high school than going to college. So how do we help navigate that? We support students and identify those internships that I talked about, and more importantly, the work experiences. Now I don't know about you guys, but some of the best things for them to understand is to try it out and go, this isn't for me. This isn't for me. Because that's where you want to make sure that they realize that. I remember one summer working for Wally Sickles out 14 hours in the sun pulling wire for electrical, and I go, can't wait to go back to college because this is not for me, right? That's where you got to learn those things. Better to do it than be told. And obviously we provide skills and equipment also to help them in their employment journey. Software, hardware, you know, our jobs for recovery, where we're working with second chance individuals who have disabilities and mental health and substance use. We're providing things like they're working in a warehouse and we'll provide steel-toed boots. We'll help them out with other equipped safety goggles, things like that. How do we help them with this type of material so that they can be successful in their employment journey? Some of the metrics that we think are that are important. In 2023, we assisted over 18,972 young people with disabilities, including 5,268 students through OTSP find their employment goals. We also served 1,756 students with disabilities who were enrolled in career tech, which is a huge part, I think, as we move forward about credentialing, because I think that's kind of the incubator of credentialing. It's not just associate's degrees and bachelor's degrees. We also worked with, as JoHanna talked about, pre-EDS, which is just, you know, a fancy word of how can we cheat a little bit and start talking to people younger than the age of 14 about what they would like to do. And in the summer, we worked with over 76 vocational rehab providers, which we have over 400 across the state, do summer work experience. So again, those partnerships of learning and actually being on job and earning a little bit of money so they get to see what that's like to be able to make some purchasing decisions themselves. Our business relations team, I talk about this, Gary's heard me talk about this, and I think he still applauds it, he told me. You know, VR in the 20th century was, we would go to a business and say, hire Kim, it's the nice thing to do. And the business would go, that's great, what can Kim do? We go, well, that's not our job to tell you what to do, it's your business. We just know you should hire her because you want to do the right thing. Well, that doesn't work. It's proven that it doesn't work. We have to make sure we understand at the end of this, businesses still have to turn a profit. I'm not here to debate whether capitalism or anything. I'm just saying this is the system that we live in, and we have to make sure businesses understand we want them to be profitable. So as I call it, in the 21st century, what we do in vocational rehabilitation, we have a whole division of people who are not VR. And I remember when I started this, people would come in and go, Director, I don't know a lot about this vocational rehabilitation. I go, good, I don't need you to know that. I need you to know because you're from the Chamber of Commerce in Hamilton County or in Columbus or wherever. You know business. I need you to translate both to the business what we're doing and then come back and translate back to our vocational rehabilitation counselors business talk. How do we make sure that they understand when they're hiring somebody, we're going to first go to them and go, what are the jobs that you have that are open? What are the jobs that are hard to fill? And more importantly, give us the skill sets that all of those jobs need. Then we call it reverse engineer. We go back to the counselors and back to our talent sourcing coordinators and go, who do we have on our caseloads right now that are job ready or close to being job ready, that we can start supporting and giving them the skill set so we can send them to Procter & Gamble, so we can send them to Battelle in Columbus, or send them to the Jeep plant up in Toledo. That way businesses understand they're listening to us and they're taking what we're telling them and they're building this so that when we hand them a candidate, doesn't mean it's a guaranteed job, but they know they meet the minimum qualifications. And that's what we want to do. I mentioned Accessible Ohio. This is a really exciting thing. I love to tell the story. It was the easiest sell job I ever did in my life. I was with the governor, and we have been working at the Ohio State Fair about accessibility. We've done some things like provide charging stations for motorized chairs. We had done IRA technology, which allows individuals who are blind to download an app and would actually navigate them through, like literally you'd be like, I want to go to the corn dog stand. And they would walk you and say, you know, go this way, this many yards and stop. So we were always doing some things that were about accessibility. So I told the governor, when you think, you know, lots of communities are trying to do accessibility, you know, or SILs and others, but there's no coordinated statewide effort to talk about how do we make sure, and I love this story because I'm a Reds fan, I said, I have an individual who's blind who loves to go to the Great American Ballpark. Now, most people who don't work in the disability field will go, why would someone who's blind want to go to a baseball game? They can't see the baseball. They can't see what they're doing. But he loves to sit in the stands and put in an earpiece and hear the crack of the bat, hear the cheer. He can hear the play-by-play. And so we started working with Great American Ballpark, we started to work with other ballparks, we started to talk about what does it mean from a universal design. So it doesn't matter if you're in a wheelchair, if you're blind, if you're deaf, if you have sensory issues. How can someone come to the Great American Ballpark, go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, go to the Ohio State Fair, and be able to enjoy all those things to where it seems seamless? I always say the goal of Accessible Ohio is to make it so visible it becomes invisible. No one says, are you using the accessibility feature when you zoom in on your phone, which as I get older, I'm zooming in bigger and bigger. No one says that, right? They just know they're using it. No one says, gee, are you using the automatic doors, which most people don't realize were first put in grocery stores because returning men and women who had physical disabilities from World War II. No one says that anymore. It's just how you walk in the door. So that's what we want to try to do with Accessible Ohio. How do we make sure that public places, places of enjoyment, not just the work environment, because if you're going to earn money, we want you to get out there and spend it at all the great things in Ohio. Kings Island would love to have you come down there. So we have specialists, we have 5 of them, one also here in Cincinnati. that provides free of charge consultations. We're not the ADA police. We don't come in and go, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong. The consultation is to come in and say, here are the business practices of, best practices of what this is. Here's some grant opportunities. We will do a consultation, print it up, tell you all the different things. If you want to do a lot, we'll be able to do that. If you want to do a little bit, we'll do a little bit of that as well. So that's the Accessible Ohio Initiative. Getting started with OOD, obviously, OOD Works is a portal for individuals with disabilities. As my IT people called it, it's non-governmenty. It's geared towards, I said, is that a real word? But I'll go with it. It's really geared towards individuals with disabilities to explore if they're ready for employment. And this is key. We got to make sure timing and opportunity intersect. I don't know how many times a parent's ready for that individual to go to work, or the individual might be ready for work, but the parent's not ready to let go. We've got to be able to make sure people have the timing and the opportunity intersect so they're ready. Sometimes they're not ready, and that's okay. We're here and waiting when you are. So OOD Works will be able to allow you to ask some questions. There's a video that shows people this is kind of what to expect with the VR process. It's a good way to kind of get your appetite whet, and then you'll be able to schedule a meeting with one of our OOD counselors. And that includes working with the school districts, county boards, and our SSAs with the county boards of developmental disabilities. And that's that. So, hey Gary, I didn't know if you wanted us to take questions.
Megan's going to facilitate.
We have a few minutes for questions, so if you have questions, I'll bring the mic around so everybody can hear.
Do you want the